Hello, friends. Welcome to Thursday. Woo! Yeah, it's Thursday. All right. So I got to tell you, so every time you start a live, it says, "Hey, do you want to take a thumbnail so that you can show, what this one's about?" And obviously it's just me, right? So I'm trying to have a different prop every time. I tried to make this ball bounce in the air as it was counting down. Yeah, gave up. That sucked. It didn't work out. Anyways, welcome. Hope you're doing great today. My name is Anna Sabramowitz, and if you haven't been here before, welcome. Thank you for joining. Make sure you subscribe if you're interested in scenarios, because that is what I help people do. Now, the other piece of news that I have for you today is that I've filled my spots for the one-on-one coaching that I do with basically where I work with you one-on-one to design a scenario over 6 to 8 weeks. And basically I take you from zero to launching a scenario in that time, and get you confidently talking to people that are your stakeholders, subject matter experts, because I provide you with the support that you need. But that's all good now. I'm basically not taking any more clients like that for the next 6 weeks. And the other thing that it showed me is that I really can only take on about 5, maybe 6 people, because there's some overlap happening right now at the same time. But really, that's as far as I can scale, right? And so one of the things that I've decided to do is about last year, I launched a Designing E-Learning Scenarios course, which ran for about 7 or 8 weeks. 8 weeks. And what happened is I set up a site where we had videos and resources and workbooks and things like that ready, and examples. And what happened is you basically every week, new content was released. You were supposed to work on it, apply it to your scenario, and you had homework every week to get you ready to launch at the end, right? And also one of the things that I offered is that once you get to a certain point and you are ready, what I would do is I would offer a session with you so that basically we could talk through your project and you could get some one-on-one feedback. That was okay, but I'm thinking to be able to scale better and support the students better after I've basically ran the beta test. What we're going to be doing is launching another course, but it's going to be structured a little bit differently. So I've shut it down right now, so you can't access it at all. But except for the students who initially were in it, they have full access to that original. So what we're doing now is I'm going back, revisiting all of those modules, breaking them out into the pieces where I think people need a little bit more support. And then every week, what we're going to do is get together, all of us, on a live Q&A call, not only to discuss where people are stuck and maybe revisit some of the concepts and go through some examples of the things that they need, but also just so that I can provide that one-on-one kind of help if somebody does need it. The other thing that I find that really works, and it works better than other things that I've seen work, because we've had, in the first beta run that we had discussion forums, and they were okay, but it really relied a lot on those people like asking questions, and you have to know what questions to ask, especially if you're new. So I think that having these Q&A calls where we're all kind of focused around the same topic and we're all in the same kind of step in that design process will really help people who are either new to learn from the others, the kinds of questions they're asking, the kinds of things they're considering at that level, but also help people who are seasoned, because one of the things that happens is once we get really good at stuff, we forget that we have to still sell and explain scenarios and all the other e-learning stuff that we're doing to stakeholders. So it's a really good practice to start getting comfortable talking about these things and explaining them. So that's why I do this. I mean, seriously, right? So anyways, so that's going to be starting in about 6 weeks. I don't have anything up yet as far as a page. I'm just still reworking the content. But if you're interested in that, then just put interested underneath the video comments. And then what I'll do is when I have something ready, I'll just maybe I'll shoot you a link and you can check it out with more detail. So that's it for that. Now, the real reason we are here today is because I had a conversation today with one of my clients and also my partner, Ryan. And we were talking about the idea of branching versus non-branching. And the challenge is that if we start our conversation about scenarios saying branching or not branching, that's the wrong conversation to have. What I wanted us to think about is step back. And before you even think about branching, because what happens is when you, okay, let me tell you the story. Okay, I'm not going to deviate here because sometimes I ramble. So let's say, and this is going to mess up because I'm not Da Vinci. I can't do Da Vinci could do things in the mirror. I suck at this. Okay. So what happened is, let's say you're trying to build a scenario to teach people what it means to be like an elite visionary or an elite leader. And you pick Steve Jobs as your guy. And Steve Jobs, basically the goal of your, let's say, scenario is a transformation to get somebody to success, to experience success as Steve Jobs, right? However you want to define success. But basically, let's say each one of these, you have decisions along the way that Steve had to make, whether real or not, on leadership, whether he's going to make the iPhone, not make the iPhone, eliminate all the products that Apple was making and bring it down to one or two, right? Like those are leadership decisions, visionary and also super tough, right? Because you got to let people go, you got to let people's darlings go, all those things. That's great. But let's say you are enamored with the idea of branching. Like if your idea is to get somebody from Steve Jobs starts his life to Steve Jobs finishes his life as a success, there's a story here, right? There's a narrative and you want to follow it. Now, if I decided that instead of following, and this is the string of pearls model, if I decided that at this point I could say, okay, Steve Jobs meets Steve Wozniak, the Woz. He becomes friends with him, and then he goes on to design Apple iPhone and all that jazz. Or he doesn't become friends with him, and then what he does is he ends up working at McDonald's, or he starts a startup that designs shoes, whatever, right? What happens is when you start deviating from this and think that you have to come up with a narrative that fits this decision, instead of having a drive to the next decision point in Steve's life, you start making up a BS story that doesn't help anybody at this point. You're adding a variable to this story that is not real. And also it is not helpful because they've just gone down the wrong path, right? You are focused on, in this case, the purpose of your scenario here is to get people through a narrative. You want them to transform. You want them to have aha moments of transformation. And they're living this through the story of Steve. So that's why this sucks if you have a great story, because this makes you dilute the whole message. You're getting way over here while really you want them right over here. So if you want a good example of this, check out Work and Coworker, because one of the things that people struggle with, they're like, yeah, but I want people to have options because the world is infinite. And what about The Sims, that game? People could do anything. And that's true. That's great. But when you think about something like The Sims, which is a game where you get to infinite options of building things in a city, building a family, basically living a second life. In that space, my goal as the game designer is to make you stay in there and enjoy yourself as long as humanly possible, right? Make you feel like you have choices, enjoy those choices, enjoy the autonomy. That's fantastic. Here, that's not my intent. My intent is to get you to think like a different person, experience as many decision points as possible as this person, so you realize what it takes to be a great leader. I have a one-track mind here. Now, the challenge is not for the learner, it's for us. We see the spine. We know what this is like, right? So this to us just like, it's this simple, but that's kind of boring. Like they don't really get to feel like they're doing a lot of, that is not true. When a learner is presented with really compelling questions during a story narrative, They don't notice that it's the same look and feel. They don't notice that it's another question with 3 options. That all goes away. If you've made it the question compelling enough, all that somebody thinks about is wanting to answer it. And so it's actually better to create a narrative that supports those decisions, that has a framework visually that's very like that. After a few questions, I don't have to think about figuring it out anymore as far as what I'm supposed to do. Basically, the idea is that all I get to do, all that other stuff falls away, and all I get to do is think about the action that I need to take to move this story forward and get the best outcome. And my perfect example of this, because I think we're on the back end, so we see it, and to us it looks repetitive. Look at all these strings of multiple choice questions. This is so boring. Well, no. If you play a language learning game, which is learning, like Duolingo is all questions, all of them. The user interface also is exactly the same. Whether you're level 1 or level 10, the same interface. But that's the beauty of it, because if the questions, and they are specifically tailored and interesting to me because of my language level, and the challenge is exactly on par to where I should be, I like the fact that the user interface is predictable, because I don't have to waste any energy thinking about that anymore. That's all done. I know what to do. I don't have to think about all these extraneous things happening. I don't have to care about whether the background changes color. I don't care about that stuff. What's really important to me is that all my attention is focused on making the right decision, and the question is good enough. And so what happens is, because I'm given that choice, especially in a scenario, you can make it so engaging, and that decision point itself, when I'm presented with a situation, given those options, and then given the consequence, that in itself feels like its own little microcosm. So I don't have to reinvent the wheel every time and make it all new UI and new this. That actually is, to me, a distraction from the real learning task. You have to be very careful about balancing the innovation of what you're doing versus the actual strategy that's going to hold it all together. Because that's the important piece, right? So Duolingo, let's say they'll ask you like 1,000 questions in a row to get you to be fluent in French. Nowhere have I been like, oh, another question. I wish there was a movie. No, there wasn't, because all the questions were so interesting to me. And that's what you want to do. So let go of the structure for a bit, and just first think about your intent. There is a place for branching. There definitely is. And that place is not a place of story, because one of the things you have to realize when we're doing with story, and this is going to be a whole nother video, and I'll probably talk about this tomorrow, is that when you have a story, and I just said, you don't want to do this because it ruins your story, right? Do you really want to go down the path of, now Steve Jobs gets a job at McDonald's and he's working there for 5 years? Like, that just sucks, right? It's nothing to do with the stuff that you want them to do, which is go down this path and learn what it takes to be a great leader. But let's say, and I'm learning this through somebody else's narrative. And that's kind of cool, because we're better at looking at other people's lives and experiences and being like, oh yeah, they didn't do that right. It's easier to point it out for other people. That's why this is great. That's why stories are great, because it's not personal. We can actually have an objective view on it and learn from those mistakes a little bit differently, even if we're a part of that. Some of the stake is on us because we're helping somebody else make decisions, right? Now, let's say your goal for the learning is to help somebody practice, let's say, having a conversation, negotiating with a customer, supporting somebody, or learning how to listen. And then interpret what they're saying, maybe say it back to them, and potentially take the best action. So that's a different kind of skill set. And that's something that, in fact, the repetition and going through something over and over again is actually really useful. That doesn't require a story. Jane gets a call from a customer. Customer's upset. What do you do? Or a customer wants to return something and it's been a year and we have a return policy of 6 months. What do you do? That doesn't require a story. That's an action. And so what happens is, in that case, if you want to teach somebody the alternative paths of how to, even if you went down the wrong path, you could still have a redeeming path and bring them back up to where the customer is not totally mad. That's a great place for a branching scenario. But there's no story required there. That's an executable task. And they just get to practice over and over, making the best decision, persuading somebody, making the best sale. No story involved. I hope you get my drift. Story, stick to string of pearls. Yes, no story and practice of a skill, branching for sure. Are these rules meant to be broken? Of course. However, I'm here to start you off with some guidelines so that you can get really good at them in each of the realms. And then you can become your own rock star and say, Anna, I just did this branching thing and it is rockin' story and it doesn't lose any of the narrative. Great. That's cool. But first, in the beginning, when you're deciding, stick to these 2 realms and it will be way easier on you, especially if you're trying to put out stuff, quickly. Then it just reduces the noise, because especially with branches, you can get lost. And it's hard to then keep track of all the things you need to do and maintain that integrity for your story. So I say stick to string of pearls if you have a story. So if you have any other questions, if you have anything that you'd like clarified, shoot me a line. There's a message there. Also, if you're interested in joining me for that, learning more about that class that I'm going to be running with this basically 6 to 8 week cohort, I can say that cohort, that we're going to be putting on for designing e-learning scenarios, let me know. That'll be fun. Just leave a message saying it may be interested in course, and when I've got things ready and going and you can read more about it, then I'll send everybody else out a link. Yeah, so I hope you have a fabulous rest of your Thursday, February 7th. Valentine's Day is coming up, everybody. I hope you sent your loved ones some Valentine's gifts, or you're preparing something special for Valentine's Day, even if it is just for you, because you get to, you don't have to share that chocolate with anybody. So enjoy. And otherwise, have a wonderful rest of the day, and I will talk to you around the same time tomorrow on the YouTubes. All right, take care. Bye.